Welcome everybody. My name is David Wood, Chair of London Futurists, and today, on behalf of the London Futurists and also on behalf of the Transhumanist Party in the UK, we're going to be talking to Dr. Alexander Karran, who is standing as a candidate for the forthcoming general election in the UK in just a few days' time. So before we get into questions of transhumanism and questions of politics, I'd like to kick off this discussion by asking Dr. Alexander Karran, could you tell people a bit about your background? What kind of person are you?
Certainly. Well, I was born and bred in Liverpool. I was educated here. I've worked here basically all of my life. I have a background in computer science. I have like 2 degrees in computer science and a PhD in psychology. The focus of my studies has been human-computer interaction and computer-human interaction. And you know, I'm basically a scientist. I love science, and I've been a transhumanist since as long as I can remember. However, that transhumanism internally is not quite the same thing as transhumanism as it stands today. I've always wished for self-improvement and any means to get there. So basically, that's about me.
Great. And you say you've been living in and around Liverpool all your life?
Yes.
Right. So now you're standing as a candidate for the election. But if I look now at the BBC website for this constituency, it's got you listed here, Alexander Karran, but it's listed you as an independent. It doesn't say anything there about transhumanists. So can you explain to people why you're not standing as a member of the Transhumanist Party?
Certainly. Well, when the party began to come together, roughly around about Christmas, we started to form, and then we started to get all the paperwork together because there's a lot of paperwork involved with creating a party within the UK. And basically what's happened is there was not enough bandwidth on the part of the government to process all of the requests for party creation. And as a consequence, the party's not been registered, although it almost is now. And then we needed somebody to step up and become like reassess that statement for a moment. We felt that somebody had to stand forth and stand for transhumanism in a more concrete way, and it turned out that it would be me. I would have preferred to have stood as a party candidate, but because of the registration problems, it's independent. I don't think the website states it because on the actual paperwork involved in becoming a political candidate, party political candidate, is you have to have like all kinds of emblems, you have to have party registration, certificates and so forth, and those weren't in place. So I had to put down independent, and because I'm a transhumanist, it's an independent transhumanist candidate. Right,
and is the Transhumanist Party, which is now, I believe, got about 40 members signed up throughout Britain and paid their membership dues, have the party been able to assist you in any of the funding for your campaign?
They certainly have. They've basically assisted me both with PR, with creating my campaign leaflet. They've helped pay printing costs for the campaign leaflet, and also they pay for my deposit, which we'll see whether I'm able to claim it back.
Okay, so that's a good start. Now, you're standing in a constituency called Liverpool-Walton. And I think there may be people from all over the world joining this call. So maybe you can just tell people a little bit about Liverpool-Walton, where it is, and
certainly.
What kind of constituency is it? Is it full of working class people, as might be spoken about in the past, or is it a thriving business center?
No, not at all. It's basically largely comprised of working class people. Its neighbouring constituency, Bootle, also the same. It's basically mostly working class. The centre of the city is where all the business happens and most of the technological innovation and so forth. Liverpool itself has an incredibly rich history. It was once the premier port in the world. The shipyards we had were the envy of the world. We also had like a big manufacturing base. Large car manufacturers were based here, such as Ford and Jaguar. And before the forced decline of the shipyards and manufacturing during the time of Margaret Thatcher, you know, the constituency of Liverpool, Walton and Bootle provided all of the manpower to keep basically the working's working. Right now, unfortunately, we're at an all-time high of unemployment, mostly due to the fact that there's no manufacturing anymore. The shipyards have been largely closed down. And that's roughly about it. I mean, in terms of like Liverpool in general, though, we have like 4 universities within the region, one of which is a Russell Group, that's Liverpool University. And arguably, we do have a rich knowledge economy, which
I'm hearing quite a lot of pride there in what you're saying for Liverpool. So you think that Liverpool's got the good days ahead of it, that it's not all in the past?
No, it's certainly not all in the past. The Liverpool Waters project, which is an aim, I don't know whether it's a good aim or not as of yet, because only the future will tell, to rejuvenate most of the dockland area with businesses and new housing projects and so forth. You know, not just 10 years ago, there was like a large innovation base here, which was like had software houses. We had Monsanto and a few others. Unfortunately, that has since declined, but the knowledge and the expertise required to keep infrastructure running for those businesses is still here. And with, I believe, with a little bit of a push from the government or possibly locally, that we can make Liverpool a great place again, and possibly a hub of technological innovation for the whole of the Northwest.
So it'll be more than just a place where there's a couple of world-class football teams and a legacy of Merseyside, Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemaker, and other music. I mean, I believe Liverpool was the European city of culture not so many years ago. But
it was indeed the capital of culture.
But you're seeing a technological revival possible in that city as well.
Yes, I believe so.
So I want to encourage people who are watching this to submit questions for Dr. Karran by clicking on the Q&A button inside the interface to this Google Hangout. You'll need to be signed in to a Google account in order to actually submit a question. And you'll need to be using, I think, a desktop or a laptop rather than a small screen device in order to ask a question. But I have several questions that are lined up that I would like to ask Dr. Karran about. We've been talking so far in general terms, but I want to zero in on, well, what does it mean, this term transhumanism for you? You've spoken about it improving your life. Can you be a bit more specific about that term?
Well, transhumanism to me is, it personally represents the means to think about and possibly implement the ideal of self-improvement, self-evolution, in overcoming my own limitations, which there are probably quite a lot, ego aside. And I believe, like, not only philosophically, but obviously technologically, I can improve myself immensely in the coming years, and hopefully I'll get the opportunity to do so. Political transhumanism, on the other hand, is a whole new nest. We're currently in uncharted territory, and personally, I think it stands for the support and development and application of technology to problems facing society today and in the future, offering citizens the ability to overcome human limitations should they wish it.
So that sounds a bit abstract. I mean, what does it actually mean to the electors of Liverpool Walton, your neighbours and the people you meet as you go around your campaigning? Can you make this relevant for them, or is this perhaps a bit abstract?
Okay, yes and no. I can answer to that right now. Obviously, I've had to canvass folk for opinions. I also had to canvass them to support my independent candidacy. They had to sign my forms for me. Now, when I would say to them, I'm a transhumanist, I stand for technological improvement, technological advancement, and so forth, they would just say, what is a transhumanist? What does transhumanism even mean? And I'm then able to say to them, because aside from, say, on Facebook and on websites and so forth, and people who read about transhumanism, they kind of know what it is and what the term stands for. Now, the average person, if indeed they can be called average, has absolutely no idea what it means. So I basically say to them that we're a techno-progressive group of people. We want to apply technology to today's problems. We want to improve education using technology. We want to protect their interests for when technological unemployment happens, try and increase, make a social contract whereby they themselves and their children are provided for and able to be creative and move forward. So, it's not a case of me explaining transhumanism as a philosophical movement to them, because quite frankly, they don't care. It's not, I mean, obviously, as the years come, then those questions will probably start to get asked and then answered by themselves when they're reading our literatures and various things. But for right now, it's all about what can basically technology do for them now? What can they do for the future? Will it improve their voice? Will it improve the ability for their voices to be heard in the future? Because at the moment, in current UK politics, people are very untrusted, or they have like a high level of distrust of current politicians and the current political method. Democracy does not seem to be working for UK citizens at the moment. I mean, if you watch like UK programs like Question Time and so forth, there is an awful lot of attacks being levied against the current political leaders in terms of broken promises and so forth. And I've been telling them that we want to increase the transparency of democracy, whereby their voices are heard. That's roughly about it. I could say more, but I'm not going to.
Well, I think we should actually dig into quite a few of the points you've made, and we'll do that in a moment. But what kind of reactions does that lead to people? Are they shaking your hands? Are they waving fists in your direction?
Not for the most part. There was a few hand-waving situations, but for the most part, it was well accepted. I've discussed this with other people. I believe, like, for transhumanism, certainly in the UK, there's an opportunity now for us to control how the media will see us, rather than demonize us with pictures of the Terminator and various things. Because the term itself is basically a neutral term to the average person. It's been met with, I wouldn't say open arms or optimism or any of those things. It's just they've been very neutral. They've listened to what I've had to say, and then the conversation has moved on from there into like more personal terms, such as education, lifelong education. I've mentioned universal basic income a few times, and it's well received.
So there's a genuine opportunity here.
I believe so.
Well, to be clear, I guess you're not expecting to be elected as the MP on the...
No, absolutely not. Liverpool Walton is referred to as an ultra safe seat, not just a safe seat, but an ultra safe seat.
Safe seat, I guess, for the incumbent candidate.
Yes, indeed, Labour. It's basically an ultra safe Labour seat, and all the more to the guy. I mean, when I was out canvassing for signatures, he was also out, but he wasn't canvassing for signatures and so forth. He was personally in people's gardens doing gardening for them. He had a work crew with him, street cleaning crew, and he basically, canvassed my whole neighbourhood a day before I went out canvassing. So yeah. I was actually happy that people listened to me.
Well, that's a good sign. And although you're unlikely to become top of the poll this time round, it's a conversation, I guess, that's going to take some time to develop, and people will gradually get used to thinking, all right, if we dislike these other parties, maybe there's something in what the transhumanists say.
No, I agree. I also agree that there's possible massive opportunity for transhumanism to make a larger impact come the midterms, given the shape of UK politics right now. If there's a coalition government that contains more than two parties, then, when we're talking like 2.5 years down the line, we could be looking at a radical opportunity where we can step in and possibly take quite a lot of seats and/or council seats.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting because although the last government has stayed 5 years in power, previous governments have lasted a lot less. And I remember, and you may remember as well, 1974 was the year of 2 general elections. It was in February of that year. The Prime Minister at the time, I guess he was an MP for the Liverpool area as well, Harold Wilson.
Yeah.
He scraped in with a minority government, and it was difficult to proceed. And after a few months, he said, look, we can't continue like this. We need to ask the electors for a new mandate. And so in October that year, they did everything again. So I'm not saying that's particularly what we want for the country, but it is possible that we will be called for another opportunity in less than 5 years to continue this discussion with politicians.
Indeed. I agree that quite possibly could happen. Let's hope not. but because obviously the stability of the country is more important than transhumanism. But we'll see.
Okay. And in that stage, it wouldn't be independent candidates anymore. It would be candidates who could put the Transhumanist Party logo alongside, because the party, I understand, it was officially registered on the 1st of May. That's 2 days ago. It did take a long time because of the hold-ups that you mentioned. Well, perhaps we can dig a little bit more into some of the actual policies. And I'm going to look briefly now at this leaflet that I believe you've had printed up. It talks some of the things we've already been through about yourself, growing up and living in Liverpool, working as a university lecturer, also as a labourer, it says here. Yep. On the next page, it goes into a whole bunch. Maybe you can just tell us about your experience as a labourer. I think that's
well, it's back-breaking labour is all I can say. Obviously, as a youth, which is unfortunately not available to the youth of today, as a youth, 16, 17, 18, it was possible to sell the strength of your back, shall we say. And, early days of being an adult and so forth, it was earn a living. And in this case, it was, there's 2 tons of sand. It needs to be moved 4 meters that way. Please move the sand. So it was quite literally labor.
I think one of the issues with the political situation currently is that so many of our MPs haven't had real life experience beyond a few narrow career options, such as law and business. Well, actually, the business of politics. Many of them start off as political advisors, political researchers. And I think it would be much better for the country if more people had backgrounds in science and technology, whether it's computer science or neuroscience, such as you're studying, or some of the other fields. Indeed. So I think that's something you can take a lot of pride in. Let's just continue looking at that leaflet. Just a moment. Just bring that back up on the screen. So on the second page, you talk about a range of different things, and I think it would be good to dig into some of this a bit more. So you talk at the top there about reducing pressure on the NHS. I mean, this is clearly a concern to most voters, that the NHS is under threat. The NHS potentially is going to not provide as much in the future as people expected in the past. It has been a great national asset. How do you propose to save it?
Well, I don't know about actual saving, but in terms of like providing relief, I would reduce pressure on the NHS by pushing an agenda that calls for like greater understanding of the diseases of aging, how they impact on current healthcare practice. For example, a recent report released by the House of Lords called "Are You Ready for Aging?" It was released, and the upshot of this report, if you read it to the end, is basically no, we are not ready for aging as a country. Now, one of the interesting statistics within that report was that by 2030 there will be a 100% increase in citizens age 65, I should say. There will be a 150% increase in citizens aged 80 to 85. Now, if you think about what that means in terms of the cost of healthcare, the diseases of aging and indeed palliative care will do. The need for these things will increase quite dramatically, which will place even further pressure on the NHS. Now, the potential solution is basically a large increase in funding for the research domains concerned with regenerative medicine, such as biotech, healthcare informatics, nanotech, and obviously gerontology, with a focus not just on treating the signs of aging, but on preventing aging itself. I mean, we're not talking immortality here. We're talking enabling people to live healthier, longer. That's not quite the same thing as obviously extended longevity.
So I guess the idea is that when people are healthy, they don't incur lots of costs on the NHS. And occasionally you'd visit, and occasionally you might get involved in an accident. But the biggest costs of the NHS are when people are affected by one of these diseases, which are made worse, a lot worse, by aging of the body.
Oh, indeed. I mean, dementia there are dementia centres open up and down the country. There's a lot of research being pumped into how to care for people with dementia, as opposed to how to prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And since they have been nominally identified as age-related diseases, I mean, it does follow that if you regenerate the human, or indeed like keep them healthier longer, then the impact of said diseases will either be delayed or like basically removed from, you know, as a factor of like healthcare. And this would have an almost instant effect on the NHS in terms of relieving pressure and allowing other systems to be put in place for much later in life care.
And how can we actually get more success from the technologies you mentioned, things like nanotechnology? So that would be, instead of microsurgery, I guess nanosurgery would be even less invasive and be in principle a much more targeted and much more effective cure than cutting people up and the heavy bombardment of radiation, which has lots of side effects. So I mean, how can we make this happen more quickly?
Well, we can make this happen more quickly by basically lobbying Parliament to allow for greater levels of funding for regenerative medicine and its related domains, but also to try and implement policies that allow for the fast tracking of treatments to be tested. But this is why I put like a specific emphasis on the healthcare informatics, because nowadays the way things are done is like double-blind study, triple-blind study. You know what I mean? It involves humans, and there's always risk involved with humans. And obviously, if there's any negative consequences within those studies, then that treatment is then dropped. Now, healthcare informatics, especially the new Watson project and so forth, they're aiming to build a simulated human body where you can test N number of treatments per hour, as opposed to just one treatment. One study, one treatment takes like 5 to 6 years. So not only do you reduce like the impact on people having to take part in these studies, but you can test and retest many therapies all at once. And then if you have the infrastructure in place that allows for that innovation to be pushed out quickly, then people can benefit from these things quickly, which then has a knock-on effect in terms of like healthcare costs and so forth in the future.
So as well as these new treatment, where do you stand on preventing people from getting ill by having healthier eating and better information about what's actually good for them to eat?
Well, you know, morally, yes, I'm all for it. I was just recently asked to support a cause, which was to do with exactly what we're talking about now, which is do you want to increase people's education about nutrition and so forth? Now, I'm all for that. That is an excellent initiative. However, on the same day I got asked that, I then like walked through my city and I came across a food bank, and these were just average folk on the streets actually feeding people. Now, when I was looking at the stand itself, I did not see, you know, organic foods or any of those things. I saw what real people actually eat when they've got no money, such as tins of beans, you know, really poorly processed meats and various things of that nature. Now, yes, educate people by all means about like nutrition, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, good fats, bad fats, etc. But at the same time, you also need to give them the ability to actually buy these foods. There's no point in, you know, in fact, you would just be increasing the guilt factor. You're sitting there and you're feeling guilty about what you're eating because you cannot afford organic foods, things that don't come in packets, etc., etc. So yes, but it's got to be a two-fronted thing. Citizens need to have enough money to eat properly, and they obviously need the education to enable them to know what they put in their bodies is going to prevent disease and so forth in the future.
So we'll come back to both these topics in a moment, and where will citizens get money to afford good foods, and how can we change the educational system so that people are spending time learning about the key things for the future rather than just some interesting historical information which made sense in the previous age, but it's less important today. But before I come to them, I'd like to look at one of the questions, in fact, the only question so far that's popped in the Q&A window, but it's a good question. It's by Chris Montero, and he's reflecting on what we've just been discussing about people potentially living a lot longer, or being healthier for longer, so that they're no longer likely to get ill when they're older. But what's this going to do for the concept of the retirement as we know it today?
Okay, that is obviously an excellent question, and I was just recently talking to somebody roughly about this kind of thing, not about the impact of longevity, but more along the fact that, say, the government wants to increase the retirement age of males to, I think it's 67 or 69. Now, yes, the media says we're all living longer, etc. You know, and arguably we are in comparison to 1,000 years ago or even 200 years ago. However, the average age of death for a man is 65. That's nationwide. So if you raise the retirement age to 67, 69, then obviously the government is going to save a lot of money in terms of payouts. Now, yes, the point stands that if you live longer, then, you know, you retire later. However, it's not a case of you're living longer and you're like unable to cope with life in terms of like health and so forth, but you're living longer, you're living healthier, and thus, and I would imagine that a person would like to stay active and amenable to work and so forth as they progress, as they get older. The reason why people obviously want to retire now is because, quite frankly, their bodies are failing. So at 65, your body, you know, it is in essence at the point of failure, and that's why you want to retire, so you can spend your twilight years ruminating upon the meaning of life or whatever it is you do when you're older. I'm not quite there yet, so I don't know. But obviously it's a tough question to answer. But, you know, I can only go on what I would do myself. If I had, say, like 500 years, for example, I would treat the first 100 years as my actual childhood, and another 100 years finding out what I should be doing with myself. Maybe 300 years staring at a rock to understand its atomic structure. I mean, you know, the possibilities are limitless.
Right. So what do you think then about the traditional career model that people spent some time learning about one profession, and then most of their life was in a career where they worked 5 days a week or sometimes 6 days a week, and then finally retired? Is that a system you want to support and continue, or do you see that technology is throwing open many other opportunities for how society can operate?
I believe the uncommon technological changes, possibly in AI and everything else, will allow people to be creative, to follow their own thoughts and feelings. I mean, you know, like we were discussing earlier on with me being a laborer and so forth. Now, I could have stayed within the construction industry. Luckily enough, I did not. I was interested in a lot of things. Now, I can only imagine that the average person is also interested in a lot of things. Now, the way the education system works now, it basically dictates that you learn basics from like you know, from early childhood, and then you like start to specialize more. Now, if you have a longer lifespan or at least an extended lifespan, then you could start to think to yourself, well, no, I would like to try this first, and I would like to try X and Y. So lifelong learning. I mean, we all learn throughout our lives. This would just be a more explicit form of that.
And lifelong learning, do you see that technology is going to transform that and make it possible to learn without having to go to sit in the classrooms in the way that people have done in the past?
Yes, I absolutely agree that that's the case. I mean, you just got to look at the internet model now. I mean, yes, we have Wikipedia and so forth. So, you know, there's a lot of knowledge online. However, it does require a lot of impetus from the individual to go and learn that stuff. But if there are a lot more free online courses in the form of like MOOCs or other online collaborative means, where you know you can study at your own pace, but you are guided throughout that process. I mean, I see those technologies taking off big within the next 5-10 years.
Great. And do you think we should accelerate these technologies, or should we just leave them to come along at their own pace?
No, they should definitely be accelerated. However, this would then dovetail into my views about education in general, which I think is basically failing our youth. I mean, for the likes of myself, it was good enough to learn the basics and then, get a job, try and move on and so forth. But that was pre-internet. The internet has changed everything. Arguably, in my opinion, it would be the first of the singularities that may or may not be coming. But it radically changed everything. Now, I have children. They all absolutely depend upon the internet. Everything is information. However, in schools, you're still taught those basics. By the time you come out of school, you absolutely no idea what's going on in the real world. By real world, I don't mean traditional, right? Get out there and start working, lads. I mean, they literally have no idea about information security, information technology, how to deal with the amount of information around them, what they should be doing. Traditional industries, they still exist, but they might not. So basically, humans need to be like more cognate in terms of information and how to deal with it and use it effectively.
So these skills are the new 3 Rs rather than what people have learned in the past, being specialists in the times table and long division and having rote memory of lots of stuff. It's much more important to learn how the fast-moving interface to technology is changing, how to use it.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, you know, they need to learn how to learn more effectively rather than just learn specific subsections of knowledge. With this, you know, this was an effective way of learning in the past, and obviously provided the progress for where we are right now. But singly, we seem to be less able to deal with the complexities of technology, whereas obviously, like a group, we are more able to like create these technologies. But it's like as an example, mobile phone. I gave it to my son, said, "How's it work?" And he just looked at me. You know, in essence, it's magic. So, you know, I was saying to him, no, but it's chips, it's technology, it's the internet. And I said to him, you know, you're doing ICT in school, they're teaching you database. Do you know what's going on in this phone? I said, it's 99% database. And he just looked at me like I was crazy. But these are the things that need to be highlighted and like, you know, taught to children so they can understand these things when they leave.
Great. Now, getting more questions popping in through the live interface the whole time. I'll come back to them in a moment. Those of you who are watching, by all means, give +1 votes to the ones you want to put most attention to. What I would like to come to is this question of a basic income guarantee and the new social contract. You may see, I put up on the screen again, your leaflet, Alex, which talks about jobs are being lost because of automation. This trend is set to explode in the coming years. So tell us about this idea that we might lose our jobs to robotics, and how we can deal with that. And this also ties into the question that Julian Snape has raised. So I'll leave you to cover that.
Oh, indeed, indeed. Well, I was recently, I was just browsing the internet as you do, and I came across an article by the Financial Times. It was a small 5-minute segment, a video made about a Chinese project. A large manufacturer of electronics goods, etc., employed, I think it was 3,800 people to do their work and so forth. And obviously, each citizen that was working at the time was incredibly happy with their jobs. However, the cost had skyrocketed for the, you know, the costs of like paying people had skyrocketed for the guy who was running it. So he decided to take part in a radical project. They named the project "Replace Humans with Robots," as only the Chinese can. And it was a cracking success. Now, throughout the 5-minute video, as a technologist and someone who loves technology, a bit of a technophile, I was like, wow, this is awesome. So basically, they replaced 3,000 people with machines, and those machines were able to work 24 hours a day and obviously, you know, sleep, eat, work, and whatnot, if indeed, you know, machines can be set to sleep. However, after like 2 minutes, they then started to pan out from the manufacturing base, and what had appeared outside of it was a shanty town, and that shanty town was those 3,000 workers who were dispossessed. They had nowhere to go, they had no homes, they had no money. Obviously, the manufacturer in question did not care. It was like, yeah, I'm getting my money. I've replaced all you guys with these machines. Then, obviously, the project progressed, and out of, I think it was like the 800 people who were remaining, only 20 of them were then needed thereafter. So again, you know, there was a massive job loss. And the guy was saying, well, you know, I created jobs as well as getting rid of them. He created 20 jobs, and, you know, 3,720 people were no longer, we surplus to requirements now. This is a trend that appears, especially if you look at like Business Insider, Financial Times, etc. They say basically this sort of manufacturing is set to increase, mostly because of us, consumers of technology. I like my mobile phone, I really do. It's, you know, it's become an extension of myself. However, I would like it cheaper, and the fact that I want it cheaper means that, you know, humans need not apply for jobs because machines can do it quicker, they can make them cheaper, and so forth. But what that will have is a knock-on effect whereby, yes, the products are cheaper, but no one's actually got any money to pay for said product. And not only that, but the people who are dispossessed from being unable to actually provide a living for themselves. You know, they're just idle and unable to supply anything for themselves. So, you know, a new social contract is required. What that is, you know, is a matter of like high debate. It could come in the form of a universal basic income, which is a flat, you know, a flat amount of money where citizens are entitled to, with added incentives on top of that for people who wish to do lifelong learning and create and innovate. Or it could be a form of like negative income tax on the manufacturer or something of that nature. I mean, I don't have all of the answers here. I just know that the conversation needs to be opened before it becomes an issue that leads to massive inequality and possibly revolution. However, I have thoughts on that as well.
You've got thoughts on revolution? I mean, I wonder if you've got any thoughts on what's happening in Baltimore recently. There's a lot of people there who feel they're on the wrong end of inequality, and some of them are getting really angry and upset about it. And,
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, though, they don't think it. They are on the wrong end of inequality, as are most of us. The thoughts I have on the possibilities of revolution is if the revolution comes in the next 2 to 3 years, it will work. If it comes thereafter, then the surveillance state and the technological advancements in basically the automated killer drones that the EU is currently signed off on will make it impossible to actually revolt. you know, they'll be so deep. The governments and like those in authority will be so in deep with our knowledge, with our basically with all of our informations and so forth, that we'll be unable to actually move freely around without, you know, flagging up various things and basically putting pay to all sorts of. I mean, my thoughts are a bit unformed on this, but it just occurred to me that, you know, the surveillance state and the way it's going, it will probably have almost complete control within 4 years unless something's done about it, and revolt becomes impossible at that point.
So where does the idea of the basic income fit into this? Will the basic income bring people up to a state of sharing in the abundance that's available, that's been generated by all this technology, so that people won't feel alienated and frustrated and out of things? Is that a possible future? That
is one possible future. And we're not talking like, you know, a utopia, but we're talking, you know, giving everybody the means to live effectively, to live happily. Well, you know, happy, obviously a personal concept, but, you know, so everyone has the means to provide for themselves, provide for their families, and then possibly with further incentives decide upon themselves, right, I wish to move into this area and be creative within this area and provide more innovation, which leads to better technologies, better abundance, etc.
And do you foresee that in the future most people will still be working 50, 60, 70 hours a week? Or will they be able to have a kind of a partial retirement, partial working environment coexisting?
That's a very hard question to ask, or answer, I should say, at this point in time. I mean, I obviously come from like the generation of you work, you get stuff, you don't work, you get nothing. So, you know, even though I'm talking about UBI, I'm still trying to frame it in my own mind as how this would actually affect society. Yes, okay, I would say, like, you know, a 50-50 life of leisure. I mean, some studies, you know, will possibly show that probably 70% of the population will become debutantes and socialites, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Being social is part of being human. And hopefully the other 30 will drive us forward as a species to better ourselves and, you know, evolve.
Okay, so let's come to another question that's come up on the Q&A. This is, again, by Chris Montero. It's got the most votes at the moment. And he talks about the technological illiteracy of most modern politicians. The kind of discussion you and I are having now about the technological possibilities, both the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. Bad including the risks of surveillance, but also including the risks of technological unemployment and robots driving people out of work. It doesn't seem to be happening much from politicians. So what can be done to address that technological illiteracy?
Right. Well, in the short term, the Transhumanist Party, now it's registered, can become a force for pushing or lobbying for technological change within Parliament. You know, whether that's like, you know, talking to the existing parties and trying to get them to be more informed about like what's coming in the future, you know, in the form of white papers, in the form of discussions and various things. Obviously, in the midterm, vote for the Transhumanist Party. In the long term, Transhumanist Party in power and able to focus, manage, and shepherd oncoming technological change in a way that benefits society as a whole as well as individuals. I mean, that would be my vision. Whether that is realistic or not is something yet to be determined.
Perhaps we can see it's similar to what's happened with other great social change over time. Initially, politicians sort of thought, no, they're part. They don't believe these things at all, and they don't think about these things. But gradually, there's an upswing in public mood. So if we think about same-sex marriage, or going back further, if we think about votes for women, or going back further, emancipation of the slaves. In all of these cases, initially the establishment thought, well, we're fine as we are, thank you. There's no need to get involved in these new areas. But the discussion bubbled up, and especially in today's age, in which there's lots of internet communications possibilities, which there's lots of YouTube videos that can quickly go viral. I would hope that there's an opportunity for the ideas of the likes of yourselves, other transhumanist politicians, to be picked up more quickly than some of the changes we've seen in the past.
Oh, indeed. I mean, there's lots of scope for increasing, knowledge within Parliament. Whether it's through the Transhumanist Party or through the likes of think tanks such as Transpolitica or other group. Information needs to be provided to people. You can't just say, oh, well, why don't you know about science and technology and what's happening? If indeed their day-to-day job is the administration of government and the administration of a nation. So yes, you can blame them for not keeping an eye on the prize. However, there are mitigating circumstances within that, and it would be up to us, the Transhumanist Party, to be that force for mitigation to provide that information and move us forward.
Perhaps it's a bit like the Green Party. The Green Party made all the other parties discuss green issues. So that at one stage, I believe David Cameron said that his party, although it's blue, it would be the greenest of all parties, something that seemed to have gone in the past. So maybe in the future there will be more politicians of all stripes will be saying that they are supporters of the transhuman agenda.
Well, that would be that would be our vision. That would be our hope.
Okay, let's take a question from Chris Stewart Bennett. So Chris has asked whether, well, I'll read it out. Do you feel that transhumanism as a concept is something that people generally need to discover by themselves via self-driven reading and research, for example, rather than being introduced to it by other people? In other words, should we be spending our time trying to talk to other people about transhumanism, or should we just trust people to find out about it by themselves?
It's an interesting question. I could see it being an issue with two fronts. Yes, no one likes to be told what is what and what to do. Now, yes, people should arrive at transhumanism personally, and through their own research and so forth. But as a transhumanist party, we should be focused on techno-progressive policies, moving things forward, being evidence-based and so forth. Now, because we are the Transhumanist Party, and if we start to gain traction and success in that area of techno-progressiveness, then it follows that they will be like, well, what are these people? What does it mean? And then, it would have a trickle-on effect where they would learn about transhumanism on their own, whilst at the same time being bombarded. I wouldn't say propaganda, but being, being gently introduced to transhumanism, philosophy and so forth through the work that we do on behalf of them.
Right. Now, I want to come to one more thing in your campaigning leaflet, Alex, when you talk about a deep reform of the democratic process. And you've been saying various things slightly critical, shall we say, of the current democratic process. So what do you have in mind by this deep reform of the democratic process?
Yes, indeed. Well, I can't say that I have all the answers, because I don't. But I believe that it's needed, especially in the UK, due to the lack of trust that the electorate has for its chosen politicians and obviously the political parties and so forth. People are calling out for proportional representation. Obviously in the UK we have the first past the post, where it's certainly, if I can bring this back to Liverpool Walton specifically, one vote in Liverpool Walton is worth 0.01% of a vote from elsewhere. So, you know, in essence, it means for the 45,000 people here, the vote that you'll have to excuse me on the math front here, but I suspect that only means that it's 42 votes or 45 votes, yeah, for like 45,000 people. That's the equivalent number of votes it's worth for elsewhere. Now, obviously, with proportional representation, there would be like, you know, 45,000 votes. It would be proportional to you know, other constituencies, and everyone's voice is basically equal. I mean, that is the biggest criticism right now, is that like people's voices, or they feel like their voices are not heard. They also feel that when a politician says, similar to like the way the Liberal Democrats said they weren't going to introduce tuition fees for higher education, that politicians basically lie. Now, you know, obviously the way to get around this is by being more transparent. How the decision-making process is made should be made more transparent to the people. More referenda should be offered to the people, actually ask them for their opinions and so forth. This is a radical concept, even though it's part of democracy, supposedly. You know, the people speak for themselves and their chosen representatives then speak for them, and so forth, until like policy gets decided. However, people don't feel that that's the case now.
So in terms of the transparency, so that we know what politicians are actually doing and thinking, we know whether what they say is true or not. And do you think technology can help in that?
I certainly do. I certainly do. Well, yes and no. It's hard to determine because direct democracy and various concepts around this issue are like still in their infancy. I mean, personally, I have like some kind of vision in my mind about how blockchain technology can help with online voting and voting systems in general, and in terms of like, certainly in terms of like proportional representation. However, I don't know whether it's feasible or not. It would require research, and obviously the evidence would have to be taken into account before it was proposed. So, you know, certainly information technologies can be used to increase the transparency of the democratic process and allow people to see what's going on and to possibly interact more freely with their politicians.
Perhaps it's a bit like when you're typing something into Google, Google often pops up a little list of things and says, are you searching for this? Because it's doing real-time analysis on what you write and what information it's in its own vast database. And as you said, a great deal of modern systems are clever databases.
Indeed.
So perhaps in due course, when politicians are speaking, there will be a little Google stream or some stream from other databases running along the bottom of the screen, fact-checking them in real time.
That would certainly be one element. Another element, and possibly the more radical I've said, would be the creation of specific AI for governance. This is something I think about quite often. However, you know, we do have the likes of Anders Sandberg and Nick Bostrom saying, you know, AI is possibly going to kill us off, or it needs to be implanted with human values and so forth. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with said, but I do think that, you know, something that is a lot more rational and is, you know, stands for the greatest good for the greatest number might be of benefit. However, the evidence would need to be pulled in for that before such a thing again would be proposed. But, you know, there are AI systems, there are expert systems, and like you say, there's obviously, like, you know, clever databases that fact check. I mean, that would be a perfect place for, you know, an AI system.
I'm interested, you keep on referring back to we need to collect some evidence for something. So why don't you have more of a clear ideology in which you've already got all the answers to these questions?
I don't believe that transhumanists... Yes, transhumanism is based on a set of philosophies and so forth, but when the rubber hits the road, transhumanism or transhumanist politics has got to be evidence-based. We can't just willy-nilly say, okay, well, this is left, this is right. These are my ideologies on such, because, you know, 9 times out of 10, or at least history shows, that ideology-based politics tends to fail in the face of actual evidence. If we know something works and we've got evidence that proves it works, then we should indeed move forwards with that policy. If indeed the evidence says that, you know, it's only partially, then obviously you can offer a referenda. This is the evidence. It says 50-50. What is your opinion? You know, to the electorate. But otherwise, it's just opinion, and opinion-based is not really rational in this modern information age.
And do you think it might be possible to look at what other countries are doing? So in terms of the evidence and research, I mean, we can't research everything ourselves, but if other countries such as Finland are seriously looking at various basic income schemes, if Estonia is experimenting with online voting, and so on around the world. If there's experiments with basic income in parts of India and parts of Canada, you think we should be more open to learning from them, or should we be still holding on to our older ideological basis?
No. I think nationalism has its place in terms of personal pride and whatnot, but we should be much more open to new ideas from different segments. I mean, it's just like trying to have more women represented in business, more women represented in government. That different viewpoint is the requirement, not something that should be voted against or seen as like a negative factor. So yeah, gain as much evidence as possible from everywhere. I mean, if say in Finland they've got a project and it's successful, then why would you not take that evidence that it was successful and then possibly couple it with other things, make a case study about something local, apply the same methodologies and so forth in simulation, and see what the evidence is from that. So you've got actual empirical evidence, you've got simulated evidence, and then you can put that forth to the electorate. This is how it should work. This is how it's going to be paid for. What do you think? Do you agree or not?
So we're coming towards the end of our allotted 1 hour. If people would like to raise a final question in the Q&A, please get one in quick. I want to continue a little bit longer on this question of the deep reform of the democratic process, because there are many people who will say we shouldn't even bother about trying to get people into Parliament. And Russell Brand, for example, in this country has basically said it's entirely a waste of time to get involved in politics. The most important politics is outside of Parliament. So why do you still point to Parliament as an interesting and useful way forward?
Well, it's not necessary to be Parliament per se, but it's a historical system. It's been there for a good few hundred years now. We can't just say, right, we're going to absolutely reform. In fact, that is revolution. In fact, we need to work with the current systems, and then we need to shepherd the change within those systems until they become unrecognizable to how they are currently. And you can only do that by trying to act within those systems. You can't just say, right, here's an opposite system, because then you've got a clash, and clash leads to conflict, and the conflict may or may not be beneficial to the electorate and to the citizens of the UK and indeed the world.
Okay, so if you want to work within the existing system, why aren't you spending more time helping the likes of the Green Party? Because quite a lot of what you said seems to me would be reasonably similar to what a Green Party candidate might say as well.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, obviously you're right in that. I think the party itself, when we're fully formed and we've got our own policies and so forth, we are more than happy to work with other groups within government, other parties. I mean, obviously the Greens have a lot of good policies, and if we could work strategically with them, then that's what we will do. Same with the Pirate Party. They're obviously all about information security and so forth. Then it would behoove us to use that expertise and those skills mixed with our own policies and our own ideas on things, to create policies that are more representative and more useful to the electorate.
But why not just join one of these other parties? What is special about the Transhumanist Party that means that you would prefer that to succeed rather than, say, the Greens or the Pirates?
Well, I think our eventual vision is to be the last political party. And by that, I don't mean the only one. I mean literally the dissolution of Parliament, where we're living in a society that is has abundance, that doesn't require parliamentary oversight, where things are self-managing and so forth. Yes, it is an absolute utopian ideal, but it's the journey that's important, not necessarily the destination. So the Transhumanist Party stands for technology. We stand for change. We want to shepherd the change, manage the change, and make sure everyone benefits from it. I'm not quite sure that these other parties do. However, they do all have their own specific segment which they are effective within. We're more centrist. We're like an umbrella where we believe that we can work with other parties within that umbrella, and obviously other groups too, in order to affect actual real change.
Good. There are a couple of additional questions on the Q&A now. There's a question from James Knight, who asks if you could expand why an ultra-safe seat was chosen for the first transhumanist candidates supported by the Transhumanist Party?
Certainly, at this stage in the game, if indeed it can be called a game at all, it was deemed after much discussion that we just need to get the message out there. We wanted to, it's basically a toe in the water. We're newly formed. We're not exactly expert, as is probably apparent. So we're trying to find out how the machinery works. We're trying to find out how the message is received by average people. And that's why an ultra safe seat was chosen. Yes, okay, it would be awesome to have a victory under our belt at this early stage. However, I'm just one person. I'm currently independent. It was not deemed in the best interest of the party to go for a marginal seat where we'd have to fight and so forth. We're running on voluntary efforts. We need more volunteers to help with our efforts and move us forwards.
So nobody in Liverpool, Walton, need worry that if they vote for you, in some sense, it's a wasted vote or a dangerous vote. Whereas in other constituencies, people might say, well, I'd quite like to vote for that transhumanist guy, but if I do so, it might change the result of the election because I ought to be voting for my second or third choice instead to stop my fourth or fifth choice getting in.
Indeed, indeed.
Right. So, but we hopefully just in this situation this time round, and next time there'll be a wider range of candidates with more possibilities of larger numbers of votes.
Indeed. We'll watch this space for the midterms and the next general election, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Michael Hrenka, who is a researcher who's done some interesting work on basic income, he has raised a question which might be relevant to Liverpool, I think. And Michael's advocating that we adopt a basic income more widely, but he has laid out a range of possible ways in which we might get there. One is that we start off with just giving basic income to a certain number of people in society, maybe the very old and the very young, and gradually feed it into others. Another proposal is we just give it to everybody, but it starts incredibly low. So it might only be a few hundreds of pounds or a few thousands of pounds and gradually becoming a sustainable basic income. But his third proposal is the one he's asked about, which is that we should actually start it in one locality as an experiment. So we might give basic income to everybody in Liverpool, say, and then see whether that works or not. So is that something you think you would want to support, or would you need to research it further?
I would say both. Yes,
you're sounding like a good politician already.
Indeed. Well, you see, it's and I'm only saying both. Ordinarily, I would have just said no research, because obviously we want to be a research-based policy decision engine. However, I've obviously been walking around my city centre, and we have currently there's a movement called not a movement, I should say, a cause, the Liverpool Love Kitchen, which is currently having an Occupy type of fair in an old merchant bank, where they're basically feeding people who need feeding. Now, to me, it was surprising exactly how many people actually require feeding. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, okay, I'm a amateur politician just starting and so forth, and I've fallen on hard times myself. But I've never needed to attend a food bank in order to feed myself, and I haven't seen the queues of people. And the fact that they're living on voluntary effort and it's just food they want, not money. It shows me that it is an actual need within my city. So yes, if I could provide basic income, even on an experimental basis, to the people of this city in order to bring their lifestyles up to at least a reasonable, affordable style of living, then I would do it. And at the same time, gather the evidence that it was hopefully a successful project.
And do you have views on what you would take that money from? If we're going to give more money to people in a locality, presumably we have to spend less money elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, you see, unfortunately, no, I don't. I'm not a UBI expert by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, we spoke about a negative income tax. Obviously, automation is becoming a major factor. So, the guys who are making the money on that should possibly be taxed. There should be, if you're going to automate, then a certain amount of your profit should trickle down towards civilization. Basically, the people who are dispossessed by that automation. No, the hard and fast answer, no, I do not have an answer as to how to fund these things. It would require a lot of research. And like you say, if other locales are testing these things out, then we need to look at them closely. We need to see how it works, how it's accepted, both by the people who are receiving the income and those who aren't, and then move forward at that point.
You know, it's very refreshing to hear a politician say that they don't know the answer and they think it needs more research. I think that's a good step forward. I wish more politicians were admitting that there are many changes in their head with technology that they haven't had time to work out and get their heads around. And so in that alone, I think you are a great example for other politicians to follow.
Thank you.
We are out of time. Do you have any final message? If there are people watching from the Liverpool-Walton constituency, why should they go out and put their mark against your name on Thursday?
Well, I can only say the tagline is "A vote for me is a vote for your future." Technological change is coming, and I am aware of it. I will help the constituents, the Liverpool-Walton constituents, and the people of Liverpool to see what that change can do for them and to benefit them.
A vote for the future. A vote to put the future changes higher up the political agenda. And well, I wish you the best of luck on Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you on national television on Friday morning.
Oh, indeed.
Even the candidates who don't win the top get a few minutes to speak publicly.
Oh, that would be awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alexander Karran, independent transhumanist candidate for Liverpool-Walton. Goodbye.